Hello and welcome to my channel. It's Sweety here. I recently created this art journal layout and I really love the bright colors I got from using alcohol markers on modeling paste. I thought I'll share this technique with you in this video. But I would not be replicating it on another art journal layout. Rather, I'll create a card this time. This panel I have here is 6x6 and it's ivory cardstock 130 GSM paper. I have already covered it with black gesso. Now you can use a thinner cardstock as well, simply because gesso will make the surface non-porous. To a large extent, gesso prevents the panel from soaking the moisture in all the layers that we are going to add, and therefore the paper will not curl. The flower stencil that I am using here is 6x6 and I bought it from AliExpress. These have such beautiful details. For this technique, I would suggest that you go for designs that have some plain portion. These areas will be easier to color later on, as you'll see. The petals here, for example, are large enough for me to color. I'm using some Mont Marte modeling paste. I hope that I pronounced it right. I used the modeling paste through the stencil using a palette knife. You can use a discarded credit card or even a thick chipboard to apply the modeling paste. This paste will dry opaque. Embossing paste, on the other hand, dries clear, and therefore I do not recommend embossing paste for this purpose. I mean, you can use it, but the colors on top will be more transparent and therefore not as vibrant. I am just filling up the sections that I feel can use some more flowers. While using multiple stencils like this, the ideal way is to wait for the first image to dry, but no, I do not have the patience. So be careful not to ruin your image if you're working like this. I added some sprays to these flowers. I wanted to cover the smaller bits like the inside of the flowers with all those little dots. I'm just dabbing off the excess liquid. Now I'll take 3 of these alcohol markers. These are Mungyo power liner markers and I bought them years ago. Many of you might be familiar with big brush markers by Faber Castell. These markers are sort of a cheaper alternative to those. That's actually just my observation. These markers blend very easily on a smooth surface like that of a modeling paste. I am not an artist, and while coloring this, I didn't really think about serious stuff like light and shadow areas. I just went about it putting some green first and then using yellow marker to blend it out. So using the yellow marker on green would let the marker pick some of the green pigment, and it would work as a yellowish version of green. I would use it until it's yellow again. I hope that makes sense. I did the same thing with orange and yellow. I put orange towards the inside of the flower and blend it out with yellow. I hope the technique is more clear here. You can get rid of the extra orange or green on the yellow marker by using it on a scrap piece of paper, just as I was doing just here. Now, the reason I chose these colors is that they're bright and vibrant. If you were to use, say, a darker color like red or violet, they would not be as striking against the black. Also, since I'm using the yellow to blend out the other 2 colors, I have a sort of continuity in the color theme. Plus, these colors remind me of fall and they're pleasing to the eye. But I can definitely think of using a different set of colors like pink and yellow. It will actually be fun because pink and yellow will create orange and they will create an ombre effect of a different kind. It will be a fun looking flower, right? Anyways, this is how I imagine my sunflower to be. Notice how I'm coloring one petal at a time. This is because I do not want the orange color to dry completely before I bring the yellow. It helps with the blending. If it dries up totally, the transition from orange to yellow will not be as smooth and you might get a patchy look. I also wanted to talk a little about the properties of the ink in these markers. These are waterproof markers and the ink dries permanent. So this art journal layout or the card will last a long time, and I don't have to use a surface protectant to save the colors on this card. They'll stay as vibrant for a long time. Another great quality of these markers is that they can be used on any surface. Of course, not on a black colored surface, but what I mean is that they can be used on wood, on plastic, on glass, pretty much everything. I have colored almost the whole image now. You get the idea. The next step involves adding a brown marker towards the center of the flowers to give it more interest. Next, I'm bringing in a corrector pen, and I wanted to show you how you can get the look of colors dripping down on a dark surface using this corrector pen. I'm going to draw some lines that make it look like they're dripping down. Fluid or the white thing coming out of this corrector pen dries quickly, and therefore I can start coloring the same using the same technique of blending the darker color using the lighter one. When there's just so much going on in the background, it's always a good idea to add white. So I'm using modeling paste through Art is Stencil by the Crafters Workshop. It's one of my favorite stencils, and I'm applying modeling paste randomly while keeping the stencil straight. The contrast of white against the rest of the colors looks just amazing. And I think the most pleasing part of this whole technique is the moment you lift up the stencil to see the result. The upper left corner here looks a little bit empty, so I applied some more modeling paste there through the stencil. I have die cut the word beautiful. It's going to be the sentiment for this card. I used a white die cut, white colored card to cut out the sentiment because I wanted to get the same ombre effect on the sentiment as well. Of course, you can first color the paper in an ombre color and then die cut it. In fact, that would have been easier. Anyways, here I have taken the same colors, orange and yellow, and used it in a similar manner to create an ombre effect. You can use your Copics if you wanted to on the paper, but I don't really recommend using the Copics on modeling paste. Firstly, because it might damage the nibs of the Copic markers. Mungyo markers have thicker felt tips, so they seem more suitable for rough usage. Secondly, Copics are a bit expensive, so I would not risk them in this technique. Next, I added some white splatters to bring everything together. Also, it adds some extra interest to the panel. The panel is quite small, and therefore I want the splatters to be quite tiny. So I've used a very thin brush for my splatters. I also did orange colored splatters. For both, I used acrylic colors because they are again opaque and will be visible against the black background. Now, I thought about how the same technique will look if I used it on a white background, as in if I used markers on modeling paste on a white background, and it actually looks quite good in my head. But on the black surface, I could afford to make mistakes. I slipped on the modeling paste again and again, but those mistakes are not visible because of the black background. It hides them all. So working on a white surface would actually be more hard work because I will have to be more careful with my markers. Anyways, here you can see me gluing the sentiment with white glue, but the sentiment doesn't really stand out. and it blends too much with everything else. So in order to help it pop against the heavily loaded background, I am going to glue it onto a white paper, as you will later see. While we are waiting for that to dry so that I am able to fussy cut it without the die cut moving too much, I'm going to darken the edges of this orange panel. It's the same orange that's on my card, and therefore it will look better when I mat the panel over this. Even though only a thin strip of this panel will show, but if it can be made perfect, why not? So as you can see, this is a bright card. I will stick it onto a white cardstock such that a very thin strip of white is also visible. To glue my panels, I always prefer liquid glues. Liquid adhesive are the best for this purpose because they allow better manipulation of the panel so that it's all straight. I can move it around a little bit until I'm sure that it's all straight. This panel in itself is complete, and therefore I can stick it on an art journal of suitable size, but I have already created a similar one on my A4 art journal, as you have already seen. It seemed fitting to use this one as a card. All the supplies used in this card or layout are listed in the description box below. If you have any query regarding the products used or the techniques, please feel free to ask me in the comments below. The die cut sentiment should be completely dry by now. I am going to fussy cut it in such a manner that a little bit of white shows on all sides. The extra layer of white will help the sentiment pop out against the rest of the panel. And since this is a card, I could have doubled up on the sentiment to make it thicker and therefore look like a chipboard. Or you can also place a second die cut a little bit offset to create a white shadow. At the time of making this, I just didn't want to do another die cut, and therefore I took the easiest way out. All that's left to do now is to stick the sentiment on the card, and my card is ready. I hope I have given you some ideas, and I do hope you'll try this technique. If you want to watch more such videos, please hit the subscribe button. It motivates me to create more such videos. Thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.